Thank you for listening to my daddy's podcast. Please subscribe to our channel.
All I gotta say is, who dat? Hey, what's going on, Who Dat Nation? It is yours truly, TimothyJJones. And yes, I am the host of the State of the Saints podcast. And thank you so much for checking out the State of the Saints podcast, where we talk New Orleans Saints. And on this edition, we have a special guest with us here on the State of the Saints podcast. I'm pretty sure if you follow on YouTube, you'll see this brother is taking YouTube by storm. With his reaction videos and just doing an outstanding job. And it's a great pleasure to finally talk with him about the New Orleans Saints. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. James Skrmetta. James, how you doing, fellas? Man?
What's up, man? Man, your intro got me fired up. I was sitting here listening to the show, and I'm ready to roll now, man. I'm ready to run through a brick wall.
Hey, man, look, I'm ready also, man. I'm just extremely excited to finally speak with you. I mean, you're just doing an outstanding job. And I just want to start there, man. You know, a lot of podcasters, you know, like myself, we get behind a microphone and we just kind of talk and give our opinions on the team. You took it to a different level. You really don't see too many Saints podcasters out there doing reaction videos on top of giving their opinion. So what was the thought pattern behind that, James? How did you get this started?
Yeah. So I've been doing YouTube for a long time, and real quick, I'm reading chat. Shout out to the chat. Chat's fired up, just like I am, but I like to see that. So I started YouTube a long time ago. I went to college for sports journalism. This is like 2008-ish. And back then, like, all that really meant was you were hoping to maybe get a column in a newspaper. You're hoping to maybe get on ESPN or, but there wasn't like a platform like this. So I got a paper I got a job at a newspaper and covering crime. And during that time, like YouTube and stuff exploded and podcasts exploded, blogs exploded, like all that happened. Barstool started, the Chive, Bro Bible, whatever. And I was like, man, this is the move. Like, this is awesome. It's gives us a voice. So I started doing it then. Tried everything, you know how it is. Like when you're creating content, you try different stuff for 6 months, see if it works, whatever. So eventually I got to where I'm sure like you, I would watch whoever, Stephen A. Smith, and I'm like, man, I wish I could just like debate him. I wish I could just like talk to him. I wish I could just like give him my point because he's wrong. So then I was like, well, if I react to their videos, it simulates kind of that conversation.
Right.
It gives the viewers like two perspectives and a lot of context, and they can choose to believe whatever they want to believe. But that's how I started with the reactions, and I like it. I mean, like I think it's good for the viewer because, like I said, it gives so much context, and they can see people pseudo debate that they normally wouldn't. So that's kind of how that got rolling.
Yeah, and I when I was looking you up, man, I realized that we kind of, have like parallel lives here. I mean, you went to college in Mississippi, and I did too. I went to Jackson State. I think you went to Southern Miss, right?
Yeah, I went to Southern Miss.
Yeah, man. So go ahead.
No, yeah, I went to Southern, and Jackson State. Right there, man, right up the road. Hey,
man, I used to always come down to Hattiesburg, man, around the springtime. Used to always party out there, man. So I'm very familiar with it.
It's a party college for sure.
Exactly, man. But yeah, I mean, as far as me, man, I just got into broadcasting. I majored in communications. I work at a radio station now. And one thing that bothered me, James, was, when you listen to some of these radio hosts, like when they do call-ins, I noticed like when a caller is given like an interesting point, like the producer would turn down the pots, right? I mean, like so the host can sound like he's making a more compelling argument, and that always bothered me, man. So I kind of got into it because I wanted to give the listeners a voice. So sometimes people just want to be heard. So I mean that was the direction I went in. But what you're doing is like amazing, man. To be able to like take these different like clips and videos and also just give your opinion. And you've been knocking out of the park, man. And like I said, I appreciate your time. But I want to
appreciate it.
Yeah, but I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about the Saints. Just to kind of talk a little bit about the team, the direction. Let's go ahead and start there. You look at the Saints in 2024. I mean, it was not a good season. Only won 5 games. A lot of us thought that maybe the Saints would go in a different direction, right? I mean, new head coach, new coaching staff. Just kind of hit the reset button. But now we've seen over the last couple of weeks, we pretty much seen the general manager, Mickey Loomis. He gave us a press conference a couple of months ago telling us that he just really felt that the injuries played a huge role. What do you think about this direction that the Saints are going in? Mickey Loomis standing on business when it comes to the injuries playing a huge role and why the Saints ended up with 5 wins.
So this is a controversial yet brave opinion. And I think this is where we're going to we may differ on this because I listened to you and the Trizzy this episode, and y'all talked about Mickey Loomis a little bit. I might be the only person that sort of sees Mickey's point with a lot of stuff. And the injury thing, no doubt about it. The injuries absolutely played a huge role in what happened. Now, in the grand scheme of things, would we have actually made a difference in the NFC? Probably not. Would we have won the Super Bowl? No. We could have competed for the division. Would we have been the best team in the division? Maybe 1A, 1B with the Bucks. But we absolutely, if everyone's healthy, no way we're a 5-win team. So the answer probably is somewhere in the middle. It's I think I would say we were probably closer to a 9-ish, 10-ish win team. So yeah, if you're Mickey, it's look, we tried to do something, didn't work. We had, at one point, I think it was something like 9 starters on offense and 4 starters on defense were hurt. At that point, you got to put your hands up and say, what are you going to do? So just like the Bengals have gone 9-8 back-to-back years. Right. No doubt injuries are the reason they went 9-8, right? So it just happens. I don't think he's dishonest when he says that.
Yeah. Look, I don't have a problem with him saying that injuries played a role, but my issue is he making it seem like it was the biggest issue. The problem is, to me, is it was the injuries on top of some of the practices that took place years before, not drafting well. You're not going to have a guy who comes off the bench that's going to be better than your starter, but you will have somebody that be able to pick up the slack until that person comes back. So I think it's a collection of things. My biggest issue with Mickey was the fact that I feel like he's really trying to push that issue, and that just wasn't the only case. So let me ask you this. With that being said, are you in agreement when it comes to Dennis Allen being fired?
Oh, yeah. I was waving my man. I was waving the flag for Pete Carmichael and Dennis Allen to be fired. But that's a good point. So that's a good example of where it's man, there's a little bit of half truth, a little bit of half this. Allen absolutely should have been fired. No doubt about it. But I also understand why he was given the chance to be the head coach. At the time, you've got whatever it was, 10 years of really good results for the team. You got a lot of the same players there. You have a top 5 defense. You've got arguably the best DC in the NFL. So it's well, yeah, okay, I could see why you would let him try and keep things running. And then it didn't work, so we got fired. And it is what it is. But it's hard to imagine Loomis having Allen in the building in that situation and telling him to hit the road, right? So on one hand, yes, horrible, 2+ years with Allen for sure. But, and let me go back to another point you made about the roster.
Okay.
Agree. The problem with how the Saints do business is that it makes things, you have a really shallow roster because you're invested in your core. That's the whole philosophy. Saints do it, Eagles do it, Bengals do it, Chiefs do it, teams across the league do it. You get your core players, you pay them, you invest in them, and you say, we'll try and win for 4 or 5 years, right? The Saints did that with Ryan Ramczyk, Alvin Kamara, Demario Davis, Cam Jordan, Michael Thomas. Like, we all know the core. Well, the problem when you do that is that there isn't anyone else because you've invested in that core, just like the Bengals. If Jamar Chase and T. Higgins go down, bad news. They're going to be calling some undrafted free agent, some random wide receiver to come fill the gap because they can't have a deep roster when you operate like that. The Eagles are the example of how you do it right? You invest, but then you get value out of draft picks. You get value out of free agents on the cheap contracts. For the Eagles, this is easy. The chat can answer. Feel free to answer, chat. Who do the Eagles get value out of? Jalen Carter, rookie contract. Cooper DeJean, rookie contract. Zach Bond, super cheap free agent contract. If you don't have that, it's hard to be a deep roster. So I do agree with you. The philosophy does have some serious negatives if players do get hurt or they just aren't good anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that. But also, I look at when you talk about the core, my question is, how did those guys become the core? You mentioned Ryan Ramczyk, you mentioned Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara. You drafted those guys, right? And eventually they became the core. I just think that the Saints didn't look at 2017 like, okay, we drafted these really good players, and this is how we need to capitalize on, like, kicking the can down the road and trying to make sure that we try to put the best team together. I look at the Green Bay Packers. I look at the Ravens. Me personally, James, I think that the best teams are built through the draft. Like, you look at what Baltimore has done. You look at what Green Bay has done. Look at all those talented guys. Even what you just alluded to with the Eagles. They draft really good players. They draft players that can hit the ground running. Like, look at Cooper DeJean. Look at Mitchell. Look at all these young guys that just step foot on the field and made an immediate impact. That's the same thing that happened in 2017. The Eagles looked at that and said, this is how we need to follow suit. This is how we need to create a blueprint. The Saints, they were like, oh yeah, we hit, we struck and we hit lightning, got lightning in a bottle here. So let's just go ahead and just capitalize on it. But they didn't build on it. So I just think that you need to build through the draft and also be able to also compensate for some of these bigger contracts. You got to be able to keep on trying to find the best players possible. I just think sometimes, and I could be wrong with this, but I feel like sometimes the Saints want to be the smartest team in a room versus just being the most cerebral team in a room. Like you got to be able to, I guess look at what other people are doing and be able to kind of capitalize on it. It's okay to look at what someone else is doing and be like, okay, maybe we need to try to do this too. I'm not saying completely copy them, but if you see something working, I mean, why the heck not? Let's just give it a shot. Let's talk a little bit about Brandin Cooks. Let's talk a little bit about Ugo Abadi, Juwan Johnson, some familiar guys that have been around the team for a couple of years, like Juwan Johnson, Ugo Amadi. Brandin Cooks was drafted by the Saints a couple of years back. What are your thoughts about the Saints bringing back guys like Juwan Johnson? I mean, Juwan Johnson had his best season probably of his career last year, but it had a lot to do with those injuries and the Saints calling on him and him getting the majority of the targets. Do you think that was a smart decision by the New Orleans Saints, maybe bringing Juwan Johnson back? Because there's a talented guy in the draft named Tyler Warren that a lot of draft boards thought the Saints could acquire.
Yeah, the Juwan Johnson one, I was pretty lukewarm on. A lot of their moves were just filling roster spot. Like the Brandin Cooks thing, it's just a roster spot fill. Some of the stuff is just kind of whatever, like the Dante Pettis move. The Juwan Johnson one, that one is the contract where you look at it and you're like, you probably could have got this somewhere else. Like you probably could have got the same value out of it. Now, I do have a theory that is based in nothing. That's just completely fabricated by me. That so the Saints, like their wide receiver room, right? What is it? It's a bunch of 6-foot guys who are kind of quick and fast, but what do they need, right? They need like that big body, pause. Like they need that big body receiver. Well, Juwan Johnson was a receiver first. So all I'm thinking is that maybe Kellen Moore sees Juwan Johnson as that big body receiver. And if you think about Juwan Johnson's contract as like 50% receiver, 50% tight end, then the contract's kind of okay because you're paying whatever, $10 million a year. If that's the plan, then okay, I can see that. If he's just a tried and true tight end, the contract's a little confusing at that point. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Kellen has that idea in mind of like, okay, I mean, this is like a super low hanging fruit comparison, but like, okay, he's more of a Dallas Goedert. Like he's more of a high volume, like, move the chains kind of guy. He's more of he's kind of a tweener receiver / tight end. So I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, but just in a vacuum, yeah, I didn't like the Juwan Johnson contract. I thought it was too much.
Yeah, I just look at Juwan Johnson is the type of player is what you see is what you get. Like I think that there's always going to be a game where you look at Juwan Johnson and say, man, maybe the light has come on. I think about that game where I want to say the Saints played Tampa, not this past year, but
last
the year
game
before.
Of the year.
Yeah. I mean, and he balled out. There's always going to be those games, but I look at it. Do you remember Brandin Coleman? Like you remember Brandin Coleman was with the team every time at training camp. Oh man, this is his year. This is his year. He became like something, that was salvageable like towards the tail end of his Saints career, where they used him as a red zone threat, but he never like really turned into that wide receiver that the Saints wanted him to be. I think Juwan Johnson, I think that he will give you something, but I don't know if like a 3-year contract is suffice to what he can actually bring. I think that I'm willing to give Kellen Moore an opportunity with him. We know that Kellen Moore knows how to use a tight end. I mean, we've seen him do it with Dalton Schultz. We've seen him do it with, Gerald Everett. We've seen him, leave his stamp everywhere he's went when it comes to the tight end. But, I just wonder, like, what was the thought pattern behind that? Was it just, the fact that the Saints are comfortable with him? Or do they feel like there's something inside of Juwan Johnson that they can just pull out and maybe he can be, that top tight end? I mean, it remains to be seen. He has all the upside and ability and talent that it takes to get there. But, I mean, I leave him. He has a lot of question marks when it comes to that, in my opinion.
For sure.
Yeah, but are you talking about Brandin Cooks? You talk about like another 6 foot, 180-pound receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Like you basically have a room full of those guys. I agree with you. I look at other teams. You got DK Metcalf when he was in Seattle. You had Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Well, with the Philadelphia Eagles, you got AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. Like there's always that big body guy that demands a double team that can go across the middle. That's a matchup nightmare. There's some report. I don't want to say reports, but there's some people that feel that maybe a player like Chris Olave could be tradable, right? Bringing in somebody like Brandin Cooks and, maybe shopping around Chris Olave. Chris Olave has had some injuries, dealing with concussions. He's also like, even though he is that number one guy for the Saints, when you look around the league, I don't look at him as like that top number one guy. Like you look at Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. I don't look at Chris Olave that way. So is Chris Olave like tradable if Brandin Cooks comes in? Like, what do you think about that? Or maybe the Saints could, I don't know, maybe, like I said, shop him around. And there's a lot of talented wide receivers that kind of fit that bill that we were alluding to in the draft. Do you think that he can be tradable?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was the front office, I would certainly be entertaining trades. I mean, I think he's got a lot of value for like what a team would want. I don't think he's a true one. Like I don't think he's there. The Cooks thing, Cooks to me makes a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons. One, incredibly cheap. You're talking about $6.5 million a year. That's like, I mean, that's nothing money for, like a roster piece. Cooks also is a vet. Okay. So you need a vet in a very, very young receiver room, especially if you're going to draft a receiver, get even younger.
Yeah.
You lose MVS. So you want to replace MVS, right? Well, MVS does what Rashid Shaheed does. So if Rashid is back, you don't need MVS. So if you have Rashid, you have Chris Olave, Brandin Cooks makes sense because he can kind of do everything. He can kind of be an intermediate route runner. His ADOT's like something like 11 yards. So he's that intermediate to short kind of route runner, where if you do draft somebody who's a big body receiver, or you draft someone with a different skill set, Cooks can kind of play off of whoever you draft. So he's like the ultimate Swiss Army knife veteran kind of guy that you'd want to bring in there. So I thought the signing was good. It's a really high ceiling as well. He's coming off of the worst year of his career, which I would say, because of injury, which I would say is an anomaly. I think he's played in like 13 or more games every year of his career, except last year in his rookie year. So you got a guy who more than likely is better than he was last year, which he'll give you somewhere in the neighborhood of, like, let's call it 750 yards, ceiling 1,000 yards. Okay. So I thought Cooks on its own, great signing.
Yeah.
Olave, if the rumors started by me, if the rumors are true that the Saints are interested in trading for Cam Ward, we'll go ahead and talk about that. Then yeah, Olave probably is the piece that they are dangling. Like, the Saints don't have a lot of assets besides draft capital. They don't have a lot of actual assets on the roster that a team would want. But Olave kind of is the asset. But if you're the Saints, if you're worried that he possibly could retire or is a concussion away from retiring, then it kind of behooves you to see what his value is. So I think Olave, I'm not saying he will be traded, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was being shopped.
Yeah. You ever seen that meme where you have a Spider-Man pointing to another Spider-Man? That's kind of how I see Chris Olave and Brandin Cooks. Like, they basically the same player. So one of them is just younger than the other.
Yeah, they are exactly. And now, like, to that point, let's say you do want Olave to take that next step. Okay, let's say you're not trying to trade him. Let's say you're trying to get the most out of him. It kind of makes sense to bring in Brandin Cooks and have him kind of mentor Olave. Like, we always hear about quarterbacks getting mentored, but we never hear about wide receivers getting mentored. Mm-hmm. So someone like Brandin Cooks, who can kind of be the adult in the room, because last year would have been the first year for Olave to really be that. Mm-hmm. So, that's another piece of it. Like, okay, maybe bring him in since he is trying to do the same thing, kind of a Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua kind of situation. So, yeah, I could see that too. But
yeah, I just look at T. Higgins, you look at Jamar Chase, look how much money these guys have gotten. Like, any Saints fan that's watching this right now, like, be honest with yourself. Would you want to pay Chris Olave that type of money? And I don't mean to sound facetious when I say this. Like, he's a number one to me, like, just by the pecking order. Like, we're doing a depth chart. Like, he's the number one guy. Like I said, top shelf. Like, if you go to a bar, like, you got your top shelf liquor there. He's a top shelf receiver, but he's not like, oh man, I got the good. You want the good stuff? Like, yeah. I'm opening up a safe, or I'm opening up a drawer to give you the good stuff. He's not that, and that's a question that I feel like the Saints, they have on their mind by, bringing in a player like Brandin Cooks. Because why would you bring somebody in that has the same type of skill set and sign them to a 2-year deal? The Saints, I think they like Chris Olave, but I don't think they're in love with Chris Olave. And
the T. Higgins part, very important, because Olave is about to have to come on that contract. Like, he's about to come up for that next contract. So I think we can both agree, unless Chris Olave has an insane season this year, I'm not paying him. Like, I'm not giving him a big contract, and he's going to want that. He's not going to want wide receiver 3 money or wide receiver 2 money. So kind of regardless of what you think about him on the field, you do have to eventually decide, like, is he, because they're trying to clear the books. Like, we know what's happening with the Saints as far as, like, trying to clear the salary cap and all that. So do you then want to go straight into possibly overpaying Chris Olave? No. So another reason to shop him.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing that happened, ironically, with Brandin Cooks.
Yeah.
Brandin Cooks was the number one receiver based on a pecking order. And then all of a sudden, this 6'3", 214-pound guy named Michael Thomas came in. And the Saints were like, hold on, wait a minute, man. Like, we can actually trade this guy. Like I said, they liked him, but they weren't in love with him. I'm just wondering what a move like Brandin Cooks, giving him a 2-year deal. And I don't think that was a mistake. Why would you give him a 2-year deal? Like, you know that you're probably going to be in negotiations with a guy like Chris Olave. And you also got to think about this too, James. Like, when the game is on the line, Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed in the game, who is Derek Carr throwing to most of the time? I see him throwing to Rashid Shaheed. Like, we seen the game versus the Titans. We seen the game versus the Colts when the Saints needed a spark. Dallas Cowboys, he's always looking for Shaheed to get behind the defense. I'm just saying, like, I'm just wondering, like, are the New Orleans Saints just in love with Chris Olave? Will they end up getting that big body receiver and maybe, like, I don't know, try to listen to offers about Chris Olave? I don't know, man. That's going to be interesting. I don't, but as of right now, like, he's put up some good numbers, respectable numbers, but not like number one. We need to be married to you for a long time type numbers.
Yeah, you got to remember too, like with Olave and a lot of players like Olave, the people who drafted him, like the coaches who had a plan for him and who this and that, they aren't in the building anymore. So right. Kellen Moore, he doesn't care about what developmental plans or what the idea was for Chris Olave or any of that stuff come draft time. Like, we've seen this so many times where a new coach comes in with a new scheme and a new idea, and they just want their own guys. They want their own guys in there. They want their chess pieces. And like fans, like, we see Chris Olave very differently than how Kellen Moore sees him. And that goes for a lot of players. I mean, like Kendra Miller. Like, Kendra Miller is a guy who Saints fans are like, yeah, develop him, maybe another year, maybe this. Kellen Moore, he doesn't care about Kendra Miller's development. Why would he care at all? If he can draft, Kenshawn Judkins or somebody, he's going to do that. He's not going to say, well, I don't want to mess up Kendra's development. Like, he didn't draft him. Same with Spencer Rattler, so we're in a really weird period with that, where there's a lot of players on the team. There's a lot of guys there that we see capital in, we see development and time spent and all this, but that's not what's actually happening. And the Michael Thomas contract, I can guarantee you that's in Mickey's mind of, well, the last time we paid a receiver didn't work, right? Yeah. And Michael Thomas was a whole lot better when he got his contract than Chris Olave. I mean, Michael Thomas was the offensive player of the year, and you pay him, you think you got the next Randy Moss, the next Terrell Owens, all of a sudden he doesn't really play again. But so that might also cause a little hesitancy to pay Chris Olave.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they have that old saying, those that don't learn from their history are doomed to repeat it. I mean, it was just an unfortunate circumstance with Michael Thomas. Like, he was on a warpath. Like, I think, like, if that ankle injury never happens, like, we probably have to be talking about a guy to be flirting with the Hall of Fame. Like, he was good. But like you said, I mean, that's fair. Like, those that don't learn from the history doing to repeat it. But you look at Chris Olave, you look at some of the injuries, like, you look at, man, we're talking about head injuries. Like, think about all of those players that have come into the league, taking the league by storm, and they have injuries like this with concussions. I mean, it shortens their career. I'm concerned about it, James, because, I mean, the last concussion he had against the Carolina Panthers, I was at that game. And I'm telling you, like, when he got hit, he didn't move. Like, that scared the heck out of me. Like, I looked like he was motionless. And I was like, man, that's insane. And we're talking about a guy that had, 4 or 5 concussions in his career. I mean, you got to think about that. I mean, he may want to continue, but we're talking about, somebody's livelihood here. You're going to be living much longer than you're playing football. So we got to think about that. And I'm pretty sure
it surprises me that it's a totally different subject, but it surprises me that players like Olave, who do deal with concussions and have had them, especially ones that are like scary, like the one he got in Carolina. Why are they not forced to wear the Guardian cap? Like, it's I don't understand. I think after like 2 concussions. Same with Tua. After a certain amount of concussions, they should be forced to wear the Guardian cap, because you take another hit like that. I mean, like you said, it's not just your playing career is over. Now you're talking about like your livelihood, like who you are as a person. It can change you. And that's, way more important than football. So yeah. I'm surprised that the NFL hasn't stepped in with some of these situations, because that was a hit you see. And, even as a fan, it's like, that shouldn't be part of the game.
Yeah. I think it has a lot to do with pride too. We're talking about a game, guys, the macho alpha males. Like, I'm not going to show any type of weakness. Like we know that, right? And by putting a Guardian cap on, maybe they look at it as a symbol of being soft. But we're talking about being careful. And and I agree. Like, the NFL needs to intervene. Like, you got to save these guys from themselves. The only thing they know is to go out there and play by any means necessary. Yeah. That's the reason why you got to step in and be like, hey, wait a minute. Man, we got to make sure that we using the necessary precautions to save you from yourself, because like those guys are like I said, they're just wired and built differently. So I definitely agree. I think the NFL needs to intervene. If you're going to be serious about concussions and bringing in all of these, scientists and doctors that specialize in CTE, like let's get serious about this and protect these guys from themselves. James, do you mind we go to the comments a little bit, see what the
I love the comments. Yeah, ask questions. Comments, okay. Get nuts. Okay. Ask the questions, get involved. Yeah. I love them.
All right, so we have 3 donations to the show. I want to thank Boot Camp Kennels from 1999. Thank you for that. Will, giving you a special shout out here with the 499. Says the face of the state of the mother and franchise.
That might be the comment of the year.
Yeah. And we also have Canada.
Look at that hat.
Yeah, that boy fresh right there. It says James the GOAT. So man,
I might have to get that hat.
Man, a lot of supporters here, and they came over, and I appreciate you all for stopping by, man. And that's what happens, when you bring right here James Skrmetta, you bring the Who Dat Nation with him. Greg says, TJ, I disagree with y'all. Go and look at Chris Olave's college years. He can score a lot of touchdowns. If we had a quarterback to throw him the ball, he is a number 1 receiver.
False. Now, not correlated. Yeah, not correlated. False. Maybe if Chris Olave was playing against Big Ten defensive backs, he could be a number 1, but it's a little different. I don't know. Maybe if he plays against Minnesota, if Minnesota gets to the NFC South, I don't know. But I don't think it's correlated at all. I don't think it's a Carr problem, a Jameis Winston problem, Andy Dalton problem, a Trevor Siemian problem. Like, sometimes you got to look at – I would say go to Google and go look at like their player profiles, look at their analytics. What's his separation off of man, his separation off of zone? What does he do? What is he actually doing on the field? I would look at that, compare them with other receivers, and see if it matches up with elite level number 1s. I would assume it does not, and that's kind of your answer right there. So
yeah, I mean, he's not a bad receiver. I think sometimes when people like start evaluating receivers, it's like, oh, he leaves something to be desired. Oh, he's not a number, like, not saying that he's not a number 1, like, not to say like in a pecking order, he's a number 1, but just like Michael Thomas, if the Saints were to bring in, let's just say McMillan, they bring in McMillan, like, does McMillan automatically become the number 1? I believe that. I honestly do. Like, if the Saints bring in even Trey Harris, like, if the Saints bring in Trey Harris, I feel like Trey Harris will end up being that number 1 guy. Like, it's not saying that he's bad. If something was to happen to that number 1 receiver, I feel like he can come in and get 100 yards for you, but he's not that consistent guy. Like, Jamar Chase is a consistent 100-yard receiver. Jamar Chase, a consistent 100-yard receiver. Doesn't matter who they're lining up against. Man, why are we pretending like that stuff don't matter? There's a reason why when we evaluate wide receivers, we look at, the ones that are actual dogs. Like, we know, like, okay, if Justin Jefferson goes up against a top cornerback in the league, he gonna get his. He's still gonna get it. That's what separates the good from the great. Like, he's a good wide receiver, but if somebody else comes in that possesses a certain skill set that he doesn't have, I feel like he's just gonna move over. I mean, Am I wrong for feeling that way? I'm just saying, like, I don't know.
No, I mean, and then like the idea, the NFL is so different now. Like the idea of a one, right? Like that's very like fantasy football, very Madden. You know, it's very depth chart. Like it's very okay. This guy's name is first, so he must be number one. Like he's lining up over here, so he must be the number one wide receiver. But in the NFL, like it's not really like that anymore. You know, it's not dependent on where you are on the field or the depth. Like saying you're a one doesn't really mean much anymore. It's more about what you're actually doing on the field. You know, what you're actually, like you said, on like third downs or is your quarterback going to you on third down? Is your quarterback going to you when he needs it? Are you making those catches? What does your stat line look like? That is what's more important, I think, than being like a one. If Ted McMillan was drafted by the Saints, he's the guy. Yep. Is he the one? Is he the first one on the depth chart? Is he lining up, you know, on the left side? Like, I don't know about all that, but he is the guy. So I agree with you there. I think that, and I think it's some receivers are better as that off receiver. Like Randall Cobb and Jordy Nelson is a good example of this. Mm-hmm. Nelson was the guy. Cobb was really, really good as the two. But when Nelson was hurt, Cobb was horrible as the one. It's just a different skill set. You're asking the receiver to do different things. Michael Thomas, incredible one. Like, incredible main guy. Incredible, like we all know, a slant route or, you know, you need 6-7 yards. Perfect. That's not really what Olave is. Olave, I think, is a better receiver off of the main receiver.
Yeah. Look, I no disrespect once again to Chris Olave, but like I said, there's levels to this. This is what I feel the true definition of a number one. If everybody in the building knows that you're gonna get the football and you still get it, you're a dog. Like you mentioned Michael Thomas. Like everybody knew Michael Thomas was gonna get the ball, but they still couldn't stop him. Like whether it was like as far as the reception differential, I think it was like he had like 69 or 70 more receptions than any other wide receiver on the team. That's insane.
Yeah,
and
crazy.
Everybody knows that. Everybody knows he's getting the ball. Like, so, man, there's levels to this, man.
Yeah, I've got some stats pulled up right now. Like, this is Chris Olave in 2023. So, like, last year, obviously, I mean, he's hurt, so you can't really throw that out there. Route win rate versus man. He's 30th in the NFL. Let's see. Separation, he's like mid-20s. Dominator rating, he's like 40th. Target premium, 74th. Contested catch rate, 75th. True catch rate, 63rd. So, like, he's somewhere in the middle of top 20-ish, maybe somewhere between 20 and 30 probably. So, if you know, that's just what he is.
All right. I got to ask you the question because you got people in the chat. You going to slide over? Thank you. If you got people in the chat that's going to be like, well, how much does that has to do with Derek Carr? Your thoughts?
Man, usually, I mean, you would have to, what I would do is I would go and look at, like, a lot of those analytics do take that into account, like the true catch rate and stuff. It does take into account, like, what passes are errant, what passes are bad, like what actually should you be catching. So a lot of that is baked in. So that's the first thing I would say. But I mean, I would have no reason to think that Carr would negate his numbers or his efficiency. Now you could argue, like, I would, the better argument is like Pete Carmichael or Dennis Allen, or like, is the scheme the problem? Is that the problem? I would go there before I went to Carr.
Yeah. Speaking of schemes, let's switch over to the defensive side of the football. All right, let's switch over there. Okay, so they bring back Chase Young. You know,
yes.
Like towards the end of the season, he started to like come on. Like when they decided to bring Brian Young and have him over the defensive line, seemed like he started to play better, started to get those pressures. I know that not the most popular stat among football fans. Everybody want the defensive end to put the quarterback on the ground.
Yeah,
but how much of this new scheme, you know, moving from a 4-3 to a 3-4, do you feel could help Chase Young finally live up to that potential. I mean, we've seen him get 7.5 sacks in his rookie season. You know, I mean, it got kind of, you know, his growth kind of got stunned by injuries. But how much is this 3-4 defense with Brandon Staley can honestly help him as a defensive end / outside linebacker?
I thought Chase Young was good last year. Like you hit the nail on the head. Like people want to see sacks, right? Like pressure rate, all that doesn't really matter. What they want to see is sacks. I don't know if Chase Young is ever going to be like the sack guy because of the way that he pressures. So if you watch Chase Young, I break this down all the time.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch Chase Young, even at Ohio State, most of his sacks come from behind. Pause. Like most of them are, he's coming from behind the quarterback, coming up into the pocket. That works in college. Chat, why does it work in college? Answer, because the quarterbacks hold on to the ball longer. Because the quarterback's trying to escape out of the back of the pocket because they think that they can out-athleticize, roll out from the back. Whereas in the NFL, you see quarterbacks roll out from the front. Okay. So I'm not sure if Chase Young will ever get those sack numbers just because of how he gets after the quarterback. Now, that does make sense of why he has these high pressure rates because he is getting the pressure. Okay. So I think Chase is already good. I think he's already worth the contract that we gave him. I think he, especially in a super, super competitive edge rusher market. I mean, these numbers are crazy. Like they're getting up there with the receivers, right?
Right.
So I think already, if he doesn't progress at all, I think it's already good. Okay. Already fine. With Staley, yeah, it definitely does change some things up because now he's going to be asked to play linebacker. Like he's going to be asked to be, you know, on that, whatever you want to call it, but kind of a tweener between that outside linebacker and a tried and true edge rusher.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of unknown in that, like no doubt. But at this point, until we get to OTAs, until we get to mini camp, until we get to preseason, until we can see it, we do have to kind of trust that Brandon Staley thinks it's a fit because they're not doing that deal if Brandon Staley doesn't think he can do it. So at this point, yeah, for sure. I'm nervous about it. No doubt. It's a totally different role for him. But if Staley believes he can do it and they were willing to pay him, I'm willing to see it.
Yeah, I think that there's something there. I think that, you know, he has that athleticism and that ability to be able to do it. And, you know, I feel a little different when it comes to pressures than maybe some other people, because what a lot of people don't understand is, like, if he's getting pressure on a quarterback and the quarterback has to switch fields and Carl Granderson gets the sack, Carl Granderson got the sack because Chase Young, you know, was able to set the edge or be able to get pressure on a quarterback. So those things matter. I just think that I feel like, you know, the popularity of the sack, you know, and how these defensive ends, these outside linebackers are regarded when they get so many sacks, like TJ Watt, you know, like so many others, you know, that even Aaron Donald, when he was in the league, you know, people look at that like, oh, if you ain't getting a quarterback on the ground, then you're not doing anything. But if you go back and watch the tape, like, you know, most people don't. But when you go back and watch the tape, you'll see why Carl Granderson got the sack. You'll see why Brian Brzee was able to get into the backfield. And a lot of the times it was because what Chase Young was doing, which a lot of people, you know, aren't paying attention to, because the commentator will probably say, oh, Carl Granderson with the sack. All right, good job. you know, but, you know, but it probably because Chase Young. So, yeah.
Stats are super – we're in a weird – like we're in a really weird time here with stats and analytics and just kind of how you view a game. The stats that we know, they're like tried and true. Like I always call them like the ESPN.com stats because they only show like 5 stats. Most of those stats are kind of useless. You know, like rushing touchdowns is a good one where if you have 4 rushing touchdowns in a game and for 5 yards, it's like, well, I mean, yeah, it's cool, but did you have a good game? Like, not really. You know, like Jamal Williams with the 18 rushing touchdowns. But if 16 of them are from the 2 and within, who cares? Passing yards given up in a game is another one I always harp on. I can guarantee you right now, if you go to ESPN and look at last year's defenses of passing yards given up in a game, you're going to see like the Browns, the Patriots, teams like that will be top 5. But then you think about the context and you're like, well, of course they're not giving them any passing yards. They're losing. The other teams are running the football. They're running the clock out. So you got to be real careful with stats. And sacks is absolutely one where, yeah, if Chase Young pressures the quarterback across the field and he's got him in hell, and Carl Granderson is the one that actually gets the sack,
yeah,
like, is it with the context? It's not really that big of a deal. So I always tell people, be really careful when you weight stats that importantly. You need to see the context.
yeah. I mean, I have this saying where I say all stats aren't created equal. Like,
Yeah.
You think about, I use this example. I said if we're in a gym, right, and I'm shooting the ball right underneath the net, right? So I'm just right underneath there, and you're shooting it from 3. And let's just say, for example, we both make 8 out of 10. Like, we're both at 80%, but I mean, it's pretty impressive that you made 8 out of 10 3-point shots versus me just going underneath the rim. Right. But if we're just talking to somebody, we just walk out the gym, man, how did you do? Man, I made 8 out of 10. Me too. Like, man, y'all was on today. So all stats aren't created equal. And I just think that, like you said, when it comes to ESPN, I feel like they look at the stats that will resonate and trend in pop culture, like sacks, like touchdown, 60-yard bombs down the field, like exciting things, but not all stats are going to tell you the entire story. I mean, look at Dak Prescott a couple of years ago. He threw for 5,000 yards, right? But I don't think the Cowboys made the playoffs. Like, how many times did Drew Brees threw 5,000 yards and the New Orleans Saints made the playoffs? So all those stats don't always tell the entire story. Does it equate to winning? Like, 5,000 yards just mean maybe your defense is terrible and you had to throw the ball all over the yard, So, right. Maybe it's more impressive than a guy who had like 3,500 yards and, winning football games. That to me probably is more impressive. So, yeah, I just think that, man, you gotta.
Interceptions is another one. Like, if I throw 2 passes and one pass I throw directly at the defensive back, hits him in the chest, but he drops it, that's an incompletion. If I throw another pass to a wide open receiver, hit him in the hands, but he tips it up and he gets picked, all the stat sheet says is I threw 1 pick, but it was on the much better throw, right? So, like, you got it in 1997. Yeah, sure, you can use those stats or whatever, but like now there's too much available context to the game to where, we got to leave those kind of stats in the past.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's see. One Smoke says, I think Chase needs to put more effort on the field. Don't mind resigning him, though. Do you notice he's take plays off? I mean, I've heard that rumor, about him not putting forth as much effort on first down than he would on second down. I mean, looking at Chase Young and evaluating him, like, what are your thoughts on him? Do you think he takes some plays off there?
I've seen some of it. I mean, now it is also one of those, like, are you seeing it because you heard it kind of thing? Like, I'm watching Chase Young on some plays, like, oh, did he take that play off? But I'm not watching anybody else to see if they're taking the plays off. So with those kind of things, I usually let it kind of play out in the locker room. Like, if I hear that he might be a locker room problem, and I'm hearing some stuff through interviews and, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, like, okay, maybe there's something to this. But if I'm hearing that he's a great teammate, if I'm hearing that his teammates love him, if I'm hearing that, he's this and this, then I kind of let it slide. But I will say I have seen some plays that I thought, he kind of took that one off.
All right. Pelicans NOLA says, TJ, is Cam Ward worth it for a Saints to move up to number 1? I'll go ahead and get that question to you, James. Do you think that the Saints should try to move up to acquire Cam Ward at number 1? I mean, we know that they had a huge, a huge group of Saints coaches, etc., that showed up to his pro day. Do you think there's anything behind that?
So, all right. So I did a video before I jumped on here. I'm going to wax poetic, so bear with me. A week ago, I thought it was kind of just like fun, just kind of like a fairy tale. Like, yeah, it'd be kind of cool if the Saints would do it. Yeah, whatever. So March 21st, for all of you in the chat, that's 4 days ago, the Saints were 200-1 to have the first overall pick. All right. They were way out there. Yesterday, they were 100-1. Okay. Cut in half. Today, they're 26-1. The Saints have the third best odds to have the first overall pick. Third, we have the same odds as the Browns to have the first overall pick. Titans are number 1 with the best odds. The Giants are number 2, and the Saints are number 3. Let me tell you this. That doesn't happen unless something real is out there. Now,
somebody said something.
you nailed it. All I can tell you is, and I just gave myself goosebumps talking about this. All I can tell you is the conversation happened. All I know is 100% there is the conversation happening of the Saints moving up. Now, will it happen? Who the hell knows? Are the Titans interested in trading down? Who the hell knows? But it is not a coincidence that the day after the pro day, where the entire Saints contingency is there, Loomis, Nussmeier, Moore, Staley, everyone, Ireland, it is not a coincidence that the day after that pro day, they go from 100-1 to 26-1. There is absolutely smoke. Is there fire? We'll wait and see. But there is smoke.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. You know, when you're standing around those pro days and combines, you hear conversations, man. You hear whispers going on, and it doesn't take long for some of those whispers to really make its round. So, I mean, somebody knows something for them to be able to create those odds and put those odds out there. But
I don't know. I don't know if he. I might. Let me ask you this. We'll flip the interview. I'll go back to my interviewing days. Would you want the Saints to do it?
No.
Okay. Yeah, it's scary. It's very, very scary.
If I felt, look, James, if I felt like the Saints needed, like if he was just a missing ingredient for the Saints to live up to their full potential, then I would say go for it. But they got so many needs on this football team when it comes to depth and guys that they need to draft and develop. I just think that that's risky business. Now, it all depends on what this team, the Titans, are asking for. Like, if you feel like it won't cause you hardship, if you feel like Cam Ward is in the next 3-4 years, we're going to be talking about him the way we talk about Jaden Daniels right now in Washington, go for it. But that is extremely risky. I think it would excite Saints fans and some of the Saints fans that are probably on the fence right now, skeptical and frustrated about this team and the direction. I think they'll probably change their minds. But if he was the missing ingredient, if they bring him in and all of a sudden, like, the Saints winning the division, deep running a postseason, I'll say do it. But I don't think that the Saints are a Cam Ward away from winning the division consistently, winning 10 games consistently. I think it's going to come with, adding to this team and developing these guys. But I can also understand the Saints giving and killing more bone here. I can understand that. Okay, you can go out here and you can get your guy and you can develop him. And I get that, but man, that's dangerous. That's dangerous, because if it don't pan out, man, my goodness.
So the follow-up to that, or the follow-up to the follow-up question, would be, how good would Cam Ward have to be to justify the trade? Because a lot of the immediate reaction is always, well, we're not a quarterback away, which I agree with. But if you think he's Lamar Jackson, if you think he's Patrick Mahomes, if you think he's Joe Burrow, who cares? Like, whatever. Like, what do you mean? Like, if you think he's Jaden Daniels, right? So how good, like, if I told you, let's take Cam Ward out and I'll just say quarterbacks, like, Cam Ward will be as good as blank. Where is your line? Like, if he's CJ Stroud, would you make the trade to go get CJ Stroud?
Oh,
I think he's the line for me, at least. Because, like, if I know he's Joe Burrow, if I know he's Lamar Jackson, if I know he's Patrick Mahomes, if I know he's Josh Allen, but those are like MVP levels. So the next tier, if you think he's Jordan Love, and chat, feel free to answer. If you know he's Jordan Love, do you make that trade? It's like,
yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I would, and here's why. Because Jordan Love is still very young in his career. So regardless to, like, him being bounced out the playoffs, not playing his best football in crucial moments, we know that you can still build from there. Like, how many quarterbacks have we seen who showed potential, and when they get into the postseason, they just kind of fall flat? I mean, we celebrate this guy. Peyton Manning is one of them, right? Peyton Manning put up really good numbers, like showed a lot of promise. But when you get to the postseason, it's not, it hasn't been the same, right? I mean, I'm getting bounced out by Tom Brady, or, not really elevating that game the way that he needs to. So, yeah, if it was Jordan Love, absolutely, because the potential is there.
Yeah.
But, if it's something like, I don't know, I have to think about a quarterback that maybe got drafted, like EJ Manuel or something like that. Oh, yeah. he has really good upside, and he can throw. He has a nice arm. He has athleticism, but
right, like those are busts.
Absolutely not. But
like EJ, man, like he's a bust, right? Like those guys are a bust. You obviously wouldn't make the trade for a bust, but if you reframe the question, because people are terrified of giving up draft picks,
right?
But if you reframe it because of how important quarterbacks are, I would assume almost all of chat would trade up to get Jalen Hurts or CJ Stroud or Jordan Love or Dak Prescott when he was a rookie, obviously, or Russell Wilson when he was a rookie, and you start naming these players and you're like, well, damn, yeah. I mean, I guess for the top 15 quarterbacks in the NFL, I would make this trade. So if Kellen Moore believes, and the Saints believe this is a top 10 quarterback, if you truly believe that, and you can make the trade, you kind of have to.
Okay, but let me ask you this. Do you think that has a lot to do with what we know now of those quarterbacks? Like, Jalen Hurts was good in college, but he was a second-round pick. So that means that 32 teams in the first round felt like he wasn't that day one starter, like, or they feel like there was something that was left to be desired. It's almost like we gravitate towards things that we know for a fact are going to work. Like, that's the reason why, like, when I start talking about Trey Harris or Jaden Higgins, these rookies that are coming into the league, some people are like, I don't know about that. But if we start talking about Keenan Allen, oh yeah, bring him on the team. Why? Because we know what Keenan Allen is capable of. So do you think that's a difference? That we know what Jalen Hurts is. We know what Dak can do. We know what Jordan Love can do. Is there a difference when it comes to that evaluation process?
Yeah, for sure. Like in the example I gave, you're cheating because in that situation, the result. So the question is kind of like reverse engineered of if you know the quality of player, then how much would you give up for that player? Yeah, absolutely. Like, you don't know any of these guys. I'm like, people like Trevor Lawrence was a generational draft prospect, and he's ass. So yeah, it definitely, like, that definitely changes things for sure. But and so on the front end of the trade, it's easy to be like, don't do the trade, because there's that fear of we don't know what he is. But we saw how fast it was with someone like CJ Stroud, or Jaden Daniels is the best example, where it wasn't like people were saying, I don't know if the Commanders should take him. I don't know if he's going to make it. 2 months later, it's like, this guy's the MVP. So it is risky and it is scary. But with a quarterback, like, you got to really, which I guess explains why they're all there. You got to really dig in and say, like, how good is this guy? I honestly don't know how good Cam Ward is. Like, I've watched a lot of Miami. I've watched his pro day. I've listened to the interviews. Do I think he's like a generational quarterback? Not really, but I'm not Kellen Moore, right? So, well, we'll see. But it's crazy that the Saints are even in this position. It is insane that there is even talk about the Saints, who haven't taken a quarterback in the first round since 1970. Yeah, that they could be trading up from 9-1 to take the franchise quarterback. Insane world we're living in right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable, but I do feel like if they were to do that, you have a lot of Saint fans that kind of scratching their heads. They're upset. They feel like change needs to be made, a reset button needs to be hit. But if you do something like that, I think you're going to bring them back, because people are going to be excited about the possibility of Cam Ward and a new fresh toy. I call it the Buzz Lightyear complex, right?
Yeah.
Woody was Andy's favorite toy until Buzz Lightyear showed up, and now everybody like loves Buzz. But with that, what happens with Derek Carr?
Well, you know who'd be the biggest winner if the Saints made the trade to get Cam Ward?
Who's that?
Me and you. The videos, man, there would be so much content going on. I'm crossing my fingers just for the content. Can you imagine all the videos with Cam Ward, draft day, all that stuff? But there'd be a lot of confused Saints fans because you got a lot of people right now who say the Saints just do the same thing all the time. Mickey Loomis is stuck in the mud. The Saints are boring. The Saints are irrelevant. Doomer franchise. They're just slobbering all over their keyboard, reading all over the place on the Saints subreddit. If they make that trade for Cam Ward, all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute. We've got salary cap. We've got Cam Ward. We got the youngest coaching staff in NFL history. We just made this trade. Are the Saints cool again? The Saints merchandise would be out of control.
Yep, insane.
So who knows? Who knows what would happen, man?
Yeah. So my final question for you has to do with Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore. Yeah, I got to ask this also because people are talking about Kellen Moore, saying that he's a puppet. A lot of people think that maybe he didn't push hard enough to try to get Carr out of the door. Now, we know why the Saints restructured this deal. It was just smart business for what the Saints actually needed. But does that have any indication on how you feel about Kellen Moore? I mean, he did, he was with the Cowboys, and we know that the Cowboys have an owner/general manager that a lot of people feel like his coaching staffs are puppets. Yeah. Do you think that has anything to do with Kellen Moore, him kind of taking a step back while the Saints restructured Derek Carr?
I love this question. I loved when this came out because it was so like this Derek Carr situation with Kellen Moore is a carbon copy of what Sean Payton had with Russell Wilson in Denver. Does anybody think Sean Payton is a yellow belly coward? Does anybody think he's a puppet? No. But Sean Payton sat there and ate the first year of Russell Wilson because they could not get out of the contract. They could not eat the cap. It was financially impossible. The Saints, exact same situation. It was financially impossible for the Saints to release Derek Carr, be cap compliant by March 12th. Wouldn't have happened. So it wasn't even on the table for Kellen Moore to stand up and say, no, Mickey, you're not doing that. You have to release Derek Carr. Like that was never even an option. What is going to happen, very obviously, is they restructured to get cap compliant, which had nothing to do with Carr. It was already baked into the contract. We knew it was coming. They're going to release him, barring a career year or something. They're going to release him. They're going to take the cap hit, turn that into whatever vehicle they have to spread it out over the next couple of years, exactly like the Denver Broncos did after the first year at Russell Wilson. So I don't think Kellen Moore is any more of a coward than Sean Payton was. And it's like the most 1 + 1 = 2 obvious thing in the world. Why would Kellen Moore have done that? Why would he have demanded to release Carr? How much Spencer Rattler do you think Kellen Moore watched? I'll give you a hint. None. So it would have made no sense at all for Kellen Moore to be adamant that Carr was released. I think he understood the financials. At this point, everyone should. So the Carr thing, I think it's crazy, though. I've been saying this, and I'll ask you as well. Don't you think it's nuts we haven't heard from Derek Carr?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, I was one of those people who was very upset when I noticed that he wasn't around during Super Bowl week. I thought that would have been a really good moment for Derek Carr to really show the Who Dat Nation that he was a part of this organization. You know how you know what it is when it comes to New Orleans. Like New Orleans will embrace you. Like if you embrace New Orleans, it's going to embrace you back. Like if you love New Orleans, it's going to love you back. But if you show that you're disloyal, they will never forgive you, or it's going to be extremely hard for you to get back in their good graces. He started off on a bad note. And I just feel like he had to start to kind of build up that reputation, and he didn't. So I think that speaks volumes. Is number one, like, I guess when we think about it, is it the fact that he knows that something is about to go down? Is he not happy? Or is it just the fact that he just don't give a damn? I don't know, but I just think that was extremely weird, and I don't think that was a really good move. But let me go ahead and ask you the same question. What was your thoughts about him not showing up or being around?
I think the whole thing is crazy. I mean, like the last time I checked, the last time anyone had heard from Derek Carr was he tweeted, I think January 1st when the terrorist attack happened in New Orleans. So think about what's happened since then. You've got the Saints hosted the Super Bowl, Media Week, Radio Row, all that stuff happening, NFL Awards show, like everything happening. He was restructured, so like his contract, all that took place. Kellen Moore was hired. Like we got a brand new head coach, a brand new offensive coordinator, a brand new staff. Like all that's taken place, and nothing. So I think that also is some of the smoke to the Cam Ward thing, where is the reason the Saints freed up the $30 million, is that to possibly take the hit from the Carr dead cap if we did trade him, because trading him now would be the same as releasing him. And is the reason that we haven't heard from Carr because he knows that, because he knows, well, there is a chance I might get traded, or like it's bananas to me that one day, if Carr doesn't get traded, if he's a starting quarterback week 1, that one day he's just going to like poof, throw a smoke bomb and appear on Canal Street like Chris Angel or something. And we're like, where have you been for 4 months?
Right.
Like this is in a social media world. Like it's crazy that we haven't heard from him. So I do think it's weird. It's hard for me to imagine his teammates are just going to be like, oh, hey, Derek, how's it going? Come on back, my man. Like, yeah, hey, we had the Super Bowl here. What? Hey, you missed it. Like, it's just weird for me to think of that happening. So I think there's something afoot, as they say, about my boy Derek.
Yeah, I mean, and also there was some rumors and stories about him not, wanting to kind of restructure. He kind of figured that maybe the Saints would release him. Like, I just think that he did not do himself any favors. And if you're not going to do yourself any favors, we know how the NFL works, like behind the scenes. Sometimes it's not just a matter of somebody coming out saying something. Like, you got to kind of read between the lines. And I do not believe that Derek Carr, if he wasn't told something like you alluded to, wouldn't be around. Like, I just think that he would be around. He would be showing face. He'd be eating a beignet at Cafe Du Mas, something. Like in the city. Yeah, I mean, like not even at the press conference. Like, how many times do you see that? Dak Prescott, if I'm not mistaken, was at the press conference when Brian Schottenheimer became the head coach. Like this is your franchise guy. So when your franchise guy is in front row center, that's like indicator like, okay, he's on board. So yeah, I definitely feel like that there's some fire there, and I don't even think there's much smoke.
Yeah, the Super Bowl thing, that one is less like, that one's more of just like my personal thoughts or whatever. But the Kellen Moore, like what you just said with Schottenheimer, Derek Carr is the franchise quarterback right now, whether you want him to be or not, whatever you think about him. He is under contract right now for the New Orleans Saints. If week 1 started tomorrow, he's a starting quarterback. The Saints hired a head coach, and the franchise quarterback is just hasn't said anything. Like, that does not happen in 2025. That does not take place in a world where it's so easy to be accessible. You have to do that on purpose. And people say like, well, Saints fans have been bad to Derek Carr. Derek Carr has done nothing but be good, and the Saints fans hate him. That's all kind of irrelevant, because if that is true and if that is the case, then I don't blame Carr for wanting out, right? Like, the reason doesn't really matter to me. It's just the fact that he might want out. The Saints might be ready to, separate. Like, so yeah, Saints fans have been bad to Derek Carr because of stuff that was kind of out of his control. It is what it is, right? Like, life isn't fair, but I think that does still give credence to this idea that like, it's just kind of a toxic situation. It just doesn't feel good.
And And James, you got to remember, how did he leave the Raiders? You remember that story?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said he took his ball and went home. And I got another story too. So a couple of years ago, I was at the combine, and I was walking around, and I seen some Raiders coaching staff like just sitting down, like just talking. And I had my Saints hat on, and one of them, yelled out to me like, "You're a Saint, you with the Saints, huh?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm a cover the Saints or whatever." He said, "Y'all got our guy." This was like when he first joined the Saints.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, and he just started snickering. I was like, "What's funny?" He was like, "You'll see." So I was like, "Man, like I didn't really understand or know what he meant by that." Like, but when you look at the story that came out, like when he ended up getting benched by Josh McDaniel, the story was like they sent him home, but other people say he went home. And when you look at this situation right here, when he don't seem like he's really satisfied, is history repeating itself? That's the number one question that I have. So
yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with Carr. Like a lot of people, it becomes like he's a very polarizing guy. Like just people love him, people hate him, whatever. I'm pretty lukewarm on him. Like I think he's kind of a mid-ish tier quarterback. Like he's good enough. All that's fine. I just think that this has run its course. I hope he succeeds wherever he goes. I have no issues with the guy. I have no problem with him. I liked when he was here. I rooted for him when he's here. But like you said, you read in between the lines, like it's almost like it's just when you see a relationship that is just not right, like it's just toxic or it's just not right for either person. Like it's not a personal thing. I think the Saints would be in a better spot, and I think Carr would be in a better spot if they just went their separate ways. So
yeah, I agree. Number one, I just feel like Saints fans are used to a certain type of quarterback, and Drew Brees, who in wins, like everybody happy for him. In losses, he takes accountability, even if he threw for 350 and 4 touchdowns and know the defense let him down. It's just you got a lot of Saints fans that have grown up seeing the Saints win a lot of football games, and they don't really remember like the Saints of the 90s. All they remember is a quarterback that's 6 feet, 209 pounds, that did everything right. And when you look at this guy, it's like he's the complete opposite. And they got that old saying, you never want to be the guy after the guy. So, you're going to be held to the same standards as your predecessor. So I just think that that has a lot to do with it. I do agree with you. I don't think he's the worst quarterback in the world. But at this particular point, I just think that a separation is what both parties need. And if the Saints can find themselves in a position where they could acquire Cam Ward, that should be very, very exciting for, like you said, for people like myself to be able to make some great content.
Yeah, man, it would be insane if all of a sudden that comes through. You went to the combine this year, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I went to the combine, but I didn't get a chance to talk to Cam Ward because the crazy thing about it is normally at the combine, they'll bring out a polarizing, position player, and they'll put him at a certain podium, and maybe the next person that's the runner-up, they'll put him out, next. They put Shedeur Sanders at podium 1 and Cam Ward at podium 2. So it's like you had to pretty much pick sides there. So I didn't get a chance to talk to him. But yeah, man, I mean, I really enjoyed, the combine. There was a lot of, rumors and stuff like that going on that involved like Shedeur Sanders. I didn't really too much believe half of the stuff. I just feel like, that it was just teams using strategies to maybe try to see if he's there when they get him. But yeah, man, but Cam Ward, I talked to Jalen Milroe. He was another guy. I felt bad for him. He only had like maybe 4 or 5 reporters at his podium, man. So I said he gonna come into the league with a huge chip on his shoulder.
I kept refreshing your Twitter to see if you ran the 40. I was trying to see your 40 time when you were at the combine, but I guess you didn't bring your tennis shoes or something. So maybe next year you can run the 40 for everybody.
Yeah. Look, I think I wouldn't mind doing something like that would be exciting. Like if we can do something like that for like how Reese Eisen does it, like do it for charity or something like that. I would be open to doing something like that. I would do it if you run with me. How about that?
I don't know, man. My running days might be over. My tight hips, man. 40 might. I don't know. If sub 5, I'd be pretty happy.
We got a full year to train, like
my old age.
like the Boston Marathon, James. You know, like you train around year round, man. So we got a year to get it right. So
I'll be good to go in a year. If you give me a
there you
year,
go.
yeah, I'm 4 or 5. You know, on the hand clock, shave a couple seconds off, like
Hey,
Jalen Milrow.
So y'all heard it right here. You know, me and James Skrmetta gonna be running a 40.
Me, you, and Cam Ward, the next franchise quarterback of the Saints. We can all go out there.
Hey, absolutely, man. But thank you so much for stopping by the State of the Saints podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. James Skrmetta. Before you get up out of here, man, let everybody know how they can get in touch with you, social media, YouTube, etc.
Absolutely, YouTube. Search the name James Skrmetta, Skrmetta. Post at least 2 videos a day, usually at noon and at 6 for lunch and dinner. So so you can watch along. Twitter, same thing. Just go find me on there. Use my name, whatnot. I appreciate everybody in chat who's been popping off the whole time.
Yeah,
I know a lot of my viewers I see in there mixing with your viewers. So it's good to see these collabs. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Anytime you're looking for a guest and want to chop it up, feel free. I'll reach out and I'll happy to slide on here, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And look, I appreciate your time. You know, like I mentioned earlier, man, you're knocking it out of the park. And, you know, I look at people like you and Trace, man, y'all work extremely hard, man, putting that content out there. And I know that's not easy, man. So what you all are doing, and especially yourself, man, is just absolutely unbelievable. And it's a pleasure to finally, be able to talk Saints football with you, but this won't be the last time. And I really do appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Awesome stuff, man. I appreciate you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. James Skrmetta. And till next time, all I got to say is, who dat?
Thank you for listening to my daddy's podcast. Please subscribe to our channel.
All I got to say is, who dat?